Going.
Doing great, Rory. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, Mitchell Report Unleashed podcast, and I'm here with Chris. Man, you're such an inspiration in the wrestling community, and I'm gonna have a lot of fun with this one here. So I do appreciate you once again.
Dude, I'm going to have a lot of fun with this. Always great to connect with a fellow Canadian, a fellow Torontonian, a fellow Shure SM7B microphone owner. These mics just make you sound so buttery smooth, don't they?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. So, growing up in Canada, what was that like for you to make this transition into what it is that you're doing today?
Well, I think that when you grow up in Canada, you're surrounded by a lot of American culture. So, a lot of the movies you watch, most of the TV that you watch. I mean, think about it. You grow up watching Fox in Canada and you're watching like the Buffalo version of Fox or these other, TV stations. Do you remember, Rory, growing up and seeing like commercials for like Celino and Barnes in the Fox station out of Buffalo? So, like, I think that we're just kind of we're aware of everything that's going on there, and I kind of think that I always knew that to take my career to the next level, and I now live in Los Angeles. I think I knew that like it would just be you had to aim to try to get into the US. That was it for me, at least. I think that I grew up watching a lot of Much Music, like heavily inspired by Much Music and Rick Campanelli and George Strombolopoulos. And then when George went over to the CBC and started hosting the hour, I was like, man, that's incredible. Also, if your name's not Rick Campanelli, George Strombolopoulos, or Ben Mulrooney, that it's really hard to find a place doing entertainment news or TV hosting in Canada. So, really fortunate at 26, I had the opportunity to move to Cleveland, Ohio. That was my first American city, and been living in the US ever since.
Overcoming adversity. When was a time that you had to overcome adversity, especially in this development in show business, and maybe could be in an interview? And what did you learn about yourself, and how did you use it to springboard you to the next level?
I feel like that's been the story of a lot of my career. So, if we take it back, I went to Wilfrid Laurier University. I studied communication studies and I was having the best time there. I really enjoyed my classes. I lived with four of my best friends. And then in my fourth year, I woke up and I had this epiphany. It just hit me, dude, like a ton of bricks that we were going to graduate at the end of that year. And when we graduated, we were going to have to go work for, the rest of our lives. And it's hard to fathom that when you're 22 years old, the idea of doing something for the next 40 or 50-ish years. And it was in that exact moment. Like I already was passionate about broadcasting. I already wanted to try to do that to the best of my ability. But it hit me in that moment that like I didn't want to hate my job. I wanted to, at the very least, have a job that I didn't hate. If I could love my job, that'd be amazing. So I reached out to every radio station, every TV station in Waterloo and Kitchener, and basically just said, hey, I'm passionate about broadcasting. Can I come in and volunteer and see how it's done in the real world? And that led to me getting a volunteer position at a radio station, like handing out like stickers at events. I worked as a volunteer at Rogers Community Television, doing everything behind the scenes from cameras to VTR to audio to floor directing. And then a radio station, 570 News in Kitchener, said, well, how would you like a job? And I'm like, okay. They said, well, it only pays $8 an hour. I said, well, that's $8 more than I thought I was going to make. I was going to do this for free. So that's kind of where the journey began of me like trying to like find my footing here. I ended up kind of talking my way into an internship at Chex TV in Peterborough by randomly emailing the general manager whose email I found online and convinced him I was going to be in Peterborough, even though I wasn't. And he said, sure, come on in. So that internship turned into a job. And then I was at Chex TV as a news reporter for a year and a half, where you're writing, shooting, editing, like doing it all. That led to me getting a job on MTV2 Canada, or like it was called Razor at the time. So a Much Music affiliate.
Yeah.
And this is where, like, to answer your question, this is where it really came in. I was having the best time. Like I was interviewing musicians and actors and comedians and directors. And then this is back, I don't know if you remember this, Rory, but this is when Chum got bought out by CTV.
Yes, I
And
remember. I remember.
right, I was working for Chum, and now Chum had been acquired by CTV. And, all of a sudden they
Yo, guys, what's going on? I appreciate you. Thank you. Turn on all bell notifications, subscribe, like, and comment to the podcast.
had to figure out what to do with all these new shows that they had. and they ended up canceling our show, and we didn't really get much notice. And I kind of had to decide in this moment. I'm 2.5 years into my career. I've now picked up my life and moved it across the country. I moved from Toronto to Vancouver, and I've got to figure out, like, what do I do? I was literally just on TV yesterday, and now I have no job. So I had to decide, like, all right, do I stay in Vancouver and try to figure this out? Do I drive back home to Toronto, and maybe hope I can get a job there, audition for a TV show there? So I ended up packing up my 1995 Toyota Corolla, drove 47 hours back to my hometown of Pickering, moved back in with my parents, and then I made it my job to apply for jobs and audition for TV shows. And I think the biggest lesson learned there was to not give up. I remember I was collecting unemployment insurance, and I was like 2 weeks away from this ending. And I was just like, I made it my job every day to check the job boards, to send out cold emails, to make phone calls, to try to just get in front of the person who might be making the decision on the TV show. So it was that idea of, like, never give up. Like, every no that you get is that much closer to eventually getting a yes. And that was kind of a mentality that I took with me my whole life and my whole career. That whole time when I was unemployed, when I didn't have a job, is how I found an agent based in the US. And that's where the process started of auditioning for things in New York and LA, and kind of just made me go, there's more opportunities out there than just here in my hometown or my home country.
I love that you always bring it back to Canada, and things like that. And I think that even me living here in Canada, there's so many opportunities, but going to the next level, right? And things like that. And you show the ultimate sacrifice. You speak about, driving 47 hours and things like that. For you, what would you do if was there anything you'd want to do differently as far as where you're at right now? Was this always the dream destination for you?
I think that everything in our life has led us to be like where we are right now, sitting down, having this exact conversation. So I think if you change anything along the way, you don't then become this version of yourself. So yeah, my story and my journey has been so different from how I thought it would go. And I'm sure it's the same for you and anybody that's
Hmm.
listening to this. But that's what's so unique about this. And it makes you the person that you are now. So for me, it's been like, it was Peterborough to Vancouver to then Toronto, where I hosted a show on Sun TV, to then Cleveland to Miami to Cincinnati to now Los Angeles. And I still feel, dude, like I'm getting started. I'm just getting started.
No, no, definitely. So you say you're getting started, in the laundry list of people you said you've interviewed, a lot of popular wrestlers and things like that. In the area of showbiz, who's given you the best piece of feedback that you've
Mm.
used to apply to your interview skills, maybe business or anything in life?
I think that there's the people who give you advice, like they actually say it to you and you go, oh, wow. And then there's also the people that you meet and you just watch them and you go, oh, that's why they're so successful. So I kind of had both of that when I interviewed The Rock. And like you said, huge wrestling fan growing up, The Rock was the guy. He was the top of my list of people I wanted to interview. And the first time that I interviewed him, it was amazing watching him walk into the room. I was in there with some other people who were about to do interviews and like some camera people. There's a handful, maybe 12, 15 people in the room. And to watch him come in, and he had this energy that just like filled up the room. And he introduced himself to every single person. Hi, I'm Dwayne. Good to meet you. Hey, I'm Dwayne. Good to meet you. That was a really big lesson. And then later on, when I talked to him on the red carpet for Ballers, I asked him, like, kind of what you asked me just now. Would you do anything to change anything on your journey? Because think about it, The Rock's dream was to play in the NFL. And,
Yep.
for all intents and purposes, he didn't accomplish that dream. He played in the CFL and then got cut. And, now obviously he's had the amazing career that he's had. And he told me something that was so interesting and will stick with me forever. He said, sometimes the best things in life are the things that don't happen, are the things that where you think you're supposed to do this thing and life throws you a curveball and you end up doing another thing and it leads you down a better path. So That's been a really big one for me, especially with like picking up my life, moving to Vancouver. A year later, the show doesn't exist. All right, well, what do I do now? And all of that has led me to where we are now.